One of the principal books that Earl cites is the great Book of Hours of Jean Duc de Berry, a combination prayer book and calendar that illustrates the seasons with great landscape painting, forests, fields, and architecture. This would be one of the principal images that would guide Ivan Earl's aesthetic vision.
I've always been influenced by pre-Renaissance, medieval, Gothic, and here's a movie based on that period of time.
Sleeping Beauty is curiously a film that is Gothic, but it's also a very contemporary film in its design.
Well, it takes the ideas and the colors and the motifs from the Middle Ages, but then it reinterprets those with a 50s point of view, it being very graphic, and there's a certain sort of I don't know what the style is, sort of a Sputnik style, graphic style that happened in the 50s.
About 1950 was the height of a studio called UPA, where these
alleys. And out of that, UPA, among others, grew up and turned out some wonderful stuff. And some of that sort of made the full circle and wound up back at Disney with Toot, Whistle, Plunk, and Boom and films like that.
It's a CinemaScope cartoon in a very modern design style that is sort of like a UPA cartoon, but only better.
Sleeping Beauty, to me, was an outgrowth of this. As a matter of fact, Toot, Whistle, Plunk, and Boom is often tied in with Sleeping Beauty and shown on the same program.
I think the modernist ethos of Ivan Earl precedes everything else that he was influenced by. Because when you look at Ivan's work, you can see, oh, that's a modernist 20th century approach to reinterpreting Renaissance art.
And this was what Walt Disney saw and what Walt Disney liked. And the practical effect was that he had a great deal of sway over the film, the way it was designed.
And since Ivan Earl had created this beautiful approach to the background styling, where you have these strong verticals, it was thought, why don't we bring some of these verticals, this elongated feeling, into the character design themselves? And, this is something, of course, that Ivan wanted to create, a total synthesis between character and background, which had never been done before. I think that Walt Disney saw in the style of painting of Ivan Earl something that was the next step. And he said, let's see what Earl can do with this. That was sufficient to let the animators and the team know that Walt Disney meant business. It was very clear. Team effort as it was, Earl was captain of that team.
The styling of Sleeping Beauty became an issue because it just seemed to sometimes overtake the animation. And of course, animators want the audience to focus on their characters, not on the background. The background that's appropriately named the background.
The animators had two real challenges with the design of the film. In the first place, the backgrounds were so detailed and busy that it was hard to make the characters stand out and read against them. And also, the characters had to be stylized in a way that matched the backgrounds.
And Ivan Earl, he was very strict on the rules that he wanted the animators to follow.
The animators were always a very protected species at Disney, and they had a lot of input in terms of their character, in terms of how the characters would be colored and so on. And Ivan actually said, no, I want to have a huge influence in styling the characters and actually do all the color modeling on them.
And you couldn't argue with him about it because Walt picked him.
Oh dear, what an awkward situation.
But sometimes his colors didn't work to the advantage of our characters, and so we had some minor battles over that.
They did rebel at one point. A few of them went up to see Walt and to complain about it, and it did them no good. Walt didn't back them on this. He wanted the design to carry the picture.
I remember Frank Thomas complaining about creating a Merriweather in this balletic dance. Almost was weightless, and he was trying for that. And then as soon as he saw it in color with the black bodice, he felt she was suddenly anchored to the ground.
Oh, no.
It would create a real problem for them. And he fought to try to get the color to change, and Ivan Earl stuck to his scheme and kept it that black color.
I think Ivan Earl won on the big points. His design is pretty much what he wanted it to be in the film. However, there were compromises. I think with the Three Good Fairies.
The animators got their way too, because what they managed to do was to bring into those characters something which was the familiar Disney feeling. Although the characters wore geometric capes and pointed hats, they're warm, they're round, they're cuddly. These are Disney characters.
I think that has to do with, well, with Frank and Ollie's drawing style, and them maybe resisting going all the way graphic with them.
It looks awful. That's because it's on you, dear.
Those are the broadest characters out of all the humans, I would say, are the Three Fairies. And they even had broader sequences that were storyboarded. They were baking a cake, and the whole oven blew up. It was very cartoony and broad, but Walt thought that would be nice for Donald Duck Shore, but not for Sleeping Beauty.
There.
So even Walt brought it down in terms of business.
Walt actually wanted the fairies to be all very similar. He wanted almost a Huey, Dewey, and Louie thing. And they had to do a lot of talking to convince Walt.
So we started figuring how we could develop them into special personalities. Like Fauna came from a person that Frank met in Colorado.
She was an officer in a ladies' club, and so they called on her for her inspirational piece for the day, and she said, "Oh dear, I don't seem to be able to find this, but I have a letter here from my cousin Susie who says some very interesting things I think you'll be interested in." So she read the letter from her cousin Susie.
Of course.
And she was so sweet and so affectionate, but she wasn't with it. And I said, "There's our character."
Oh?
Everybody was working to try to lighten up the picture because it needed something to give it some more life.
John Lounsbury was my mentor, and John was given the scene where the two kings are drinking and talking about their children and their coming wedding and everything.
John Lounsbury was a wonderful draftsman, and he often got slapstick scenes.
For the wedding!
And this was his chance to do that in this particular scene.
My daughter yet, and you're taking her away from me.
John Sibley does a classic star turn in the animation of the minstrel or the jester. Sibley had a way of drawing that was as sophisticated as a New Yorker cartoon, and yet he loved slapstick. He's an unsung animator in some ways because people don't hear his name mentioned as often, but his work here on The Jester is really one of the highlights of the movie for me.
Yeah, they've got some broad things, but it's overall a good versus evil fight, and it's rather serious.
This movie, probably more so than any other Disney movie for all of its stylization, tried to simulate real human subtlety in the acting performances.
Well, this is a pleasant surprise. I set my trap for a peasant, and lo, I catch a prince.
I would say stylistically, in terms of character animation, it was a very sophisticated drawing style, and it came natural to great draftsmen like Mark Davis and Milt Kahl.
It's interesting that Ivan Earl got along well with Mark Davis. Mark understood modern art, and he understood the modernist aesthetic. Mark Davis was a Renaissance man. Mark could do exquisite storyboards, which he did on Bambi. He could design characters. He could do color work in designing characters and environment, and he was a terrific animator. He was a quadruple threat. He brilliantly animated Princess Aurora and Maleficent.
Well, here's your precious princess.
You know, having to balance characters that contrasting is a pretty tall assignment. Mark Davis really nailed it.